Today's an exciting day. SM10 is here and I'm so happy to share them with you. This is your personal set.
Thank you.
The great thing about wedge play is it really starts with building a matrix that makes sense for you, right? Getting fit, understanding what tools fit you the best and the reasons why. This set here, this is kind of years and years of you discovering what works best for you. More importantly, discovering what doesn't, right?
Right.
And I went back in time, I went back in the history pages of the Acushnet Company and the orders that you've had over the years, and I found one in 2010. In 2010, you were 13 years old, and you had a 52, 56, 60. I was kind of going through the list of all the things you've had over the years, and it's cool to see the evolution of how your short game and your wedge selection has changed over time, right?
Yes,
You start with 52, 56, 60, all the way to today's 50, 55, 60. And I think there's a lot of reasons why you chose that. So what I want to ask you was, back then in 2010 to today, what do you think are some of the main reasons why you've arrived at this set you have in your hands?
Well, first off, that's amazing that you had those orders, by the way. The part that I think is really cool is we've spent a lot of time with the 60 since I've probably spent, guys are different with their short games. Some guys might, like me, we might hit a 60 degree 90% of the time and like to manipulate it a little bit more, hit it lower, hit it higher. Some guys might just go to a 50 and they just like playing more bump and runs.
Yes.
And so for me, like we had spent a bunch of time where I'd gone from an L grind back to an M grind, then to a K because I needed some more help out of the bunker, so a little bit wider camber. And then I remember calling you one day and I said, hey, I'm kind of struggling with my chipping, but my bunker play's gotten really good because I've got some more help, but it's like my job is to not be in bunkers. So like maybe let's try to go for something a little bit more versatile. And you said, we're gonna rip the Band-Aid off. We're gonna go straight from a K to a T. I don't know if you're gonna like it or not, but we literally did this over the phone. I literally remember at the breakfast place that I was at, like when we called, and I remember getting it and I'm like, oh my God, like I don't have to worry about it being soft, being firm. I now have a wedge where I'm able to do everything with it, which is awesome. And so like, I'm really excited to see all the changes that we made here. The T's like my favorite. I mean, I love, obviously, like I said, I chip with my 60 like 90% of the time.
Yes.
But I just love how I'm able, like some guys like switching wedges depending on turfs. Like I don't want to. Like I'd rather manipulate it on my end than change the equipment. But then I say that, and then we go to the 55, which the 55 we spent a ton of time on, where we've gone to an F grind where it's had a ton of bounce. It's kind of been a little bit of the trend on tour, so guys are able to chip more into the grain and not dig in as much. But I always loved, my lower lofted wedges to be ended up having more of like an iron look to them, just because that's dominantly where I use them. And so like my 50, like this to me is like an extension of my pitching wedge, where it's like I want to make it like an iron as much as I can, but I still want to have a little bit of relief if I want to bounce it around. But the 55 to me, the 60 we really settled in probably 4 or 5 years ago, and then the 55 to me has been the really fun one because I've had so many different iterations of it, and I've now started to chip a lot more with my 55 around the greens. And so I settled on the 55-10, and so I'm excited to see what changes you've made here.
So let's start with the 50, because I think it's really important to address the 60 because it's the cool club, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much value in a sand wedge and there's so much value in a gap wedge, right?
Absolutely.
And I think when you look over the history of your playing, you were in a 52 before, your bounce really hasn't changed.
Yeah.
You've been an 8 degree for so long, and I think that just sort of speaks to what you want to feel through the turf and what you've loved with your ball flight. But you were in a 52 before. What made you go into a 50?
So I've always had some strange gaps in my clubs. Like I have to play, like even in a 4-iron and 5-iron, I have to de-loft them so it matches my gapping a little bit better. And so the pitching wedge that I had played, I think I played it at 46 and then eventually moved it to 45. And I needed just a little bit better gapping in that aspect. But the beauty of it is when you're, in that 50-52 range, you're not changing a ton.
Yes.
It's more just kind of player profile. Like, if you're a guy that's a bump and runner, you might maybe make a few changes here. But for me, like I needed something that went like 4 yards farther, which I know is super specific, but it's like I needed something that instead of me having a sand wedge go 120 and a 52 going 130, and then my pitching wedge going 147, I needed something just a little bit farther just so I can bridge that gap a little bit better. And that helped my wedge play a ton.
Yes.
It's like I can hit, we can all hit wedges as far as we want, but it's like if I have a back pin that's up on a shelf, I don't want to hit a 60 from 105 yards because I'm going to rip it 45 feet. Now going up into the, sand wedge, gap wedge, how can I hit those shots where they come out same window, just a little less spin, as opposed to coming in, super hot with nothing on them or way too much spin. So I mean, this guy to me has been awesome. I mean, this has kind of been the tried and true one that I haven't changed much through the years, but these are clean, by the way. They are really clean.
So distance gapping is the main reason why
Mhm.
you switched to this. What is it about a gap wedge that you value when you're looking at it? Like, is it an offset thing, a shape thing, a size thing? When you set one down, what does your eye really love to look at?
I think just because of me being a really good iron player and how I use the 50, I want it to look as much like an iron as I possibly could. So I've always liked the straighter edges on the bottom, having a little bit of bounce that'll help me just so it's not like I'm digging in constantly. But I also don't want to go too much bounce to where all of a sudden, if I try to hit something 100 yards, it's like I threw it, out of my hand with no spin on it. So, I mean, like I said, the difference, like when I practice, distance control stuff with a 50, I'll do it anywhere between 70 and 140,
Yeah.
which is a massive gap, but it's also like I need to be able to hit the 110-yard shot and know what the spin, know how it's going to come out. But I also don't want to be hitting something that's 135 that all of a sudden I can hit 144 and I'm looking at my caddy like, hey, what happened there? And so like the beauty, especially I'd probably say from the SM9s on, was just the consistency of everything just got a little bit tighter, just a little bit here and there. And so it's like, and we're talking like a couple yards, but that's just, that's the difference in me being in a bunker or having an 8-footer for birdie.
Yeah, and you've said it before many times. I don't want to change into something that's drastically different than
Hmm.
what I'm used to using. I want subtle improvements
Hmm.
that make sense, right?
Right.
Is my carry consistent? Is my trajectory consistent? Am I getting good spin numbers?
Hmm.
That's really sort of the emphasis on how we design, what we pay attention to.
Hmm.
And I think you're going to see that for sure
Yeah.
in the SM10s. So transitioning into the sand wedge, this is a unique club, right? Because it's not just a distance
Hmm.
club. It's a distance club, yes, but it's also a greenside club. It's a open face club. There's a lot of variety in this style of wedge.
Hmm.
And I think over time, we looked at some of the work we've done together. You've used this soul grind before, but you have had those moments where you've called me and you said, something feels a little funky. I want to explore some different options. New Orleans is one of those spots where you get into
Exactly.
those grainy Bermuda conditions. And
Exactly.
you've told me time and time again, when I get in there, I feel like the bottom is lost at times. And I
Yeah.
want to try a couple things that maybe help
Mm.
ease that place up a little
Yeah.
bit. What are your thoughts on how you select a sand wedge and how did you land on this one?
Yeah, so I wanted to be able to keep the aspect, again, just because of how much or how I use this, to keep a little bit of more of the iron look, a little bit more straighter off on the leading edge. But then I also love how, especially at least in my 10S, is that I'm able to, if I've got a shot that's back uphill into the grain and I need to run something, I can't hit the 60 because the 60 might grab too fast, but then I could just pull out a 55 and hit a shot where I have a little bit more bounce, a little bit more forgiveness into the turf to where I know it's not just going to stick right into it. And so especially like you said, like New Orleans, Greensboro, mainly Bermuda dominant courses,
Yes.
like those are the ones that I really was looking for and where we tinkered with maybe looking at an F, having a little bit more, or having a little more bounce. But then I also like having it where, out of bunkers, especially where it's like, being able to have something that I'm still able to hit from the fairway, but it also gives me a little bit more relief out of hitting a longer bunker shot.
Yeah.
Where if I were to try to build this up like my 60, I'd be leaving all my bunker shots short. But then I don't want something where it's like if I'm in the fairway, or, the thing with the F that didn't kind of correlate as much as it did with this to my game was that it would bounce through the turf too quick for me.
Okay.
And so like when we went from the F back to the S and we did just a tiny few changes to it, I immediately was able to have all three of those aspects. Those boxes were checked. So it took us a while. I mean, it probably took 2.5 years, but again, when you're a 60 dominant chipper, it's honestly like I was coming to you asking like, hey, how do I use this? It's not about like, I think I know what I want, but then it's also like, like I said, I called you on the phone. You didn't even tell me we didn't even see a shot together and we fixed something in my bag.
Well, you're very good at articulating the things that you're struggling with or
Yeah.
things you want to improve upon. But I love the fact that you took a sand wedge and you said, okay, this is not one dimensional. It's not
Mhm.
one shot, right? I need to know that it's going to perform in multiple locations and finding that balance in the grinds.
Mhm.
I think you've done a nice job of picking one that fits a lot of the shots you're trying to do.
Exactly. Exactly.
So then the 60. Now this is a cool one, right? So I've seen you go through L's, T's, low bounce K's, even the old E. I
Yeah.
don't even remember that, but
Yeah.
we had the E grind for a
Yeah.
while. How did you settle on this? Because you started in a K
Mhm.
when we
Yeah.
were working together more and more in 2018,
Mhm.
2019, and here we are today in a T grind. So you got into the K, 58 at 6 degrees, and I think it was been at 60.
Yeah.
You added a little bit of
Yeah.
extra loft to it to add
Yeah.
some bounce. And how did you get to that?
So this one was really interesting. So I was always a very handsy chipper, and so I'd get on tighter. I love being on super firm ground. So being on firm ground, I was able to dig into it as hard as I could, but then I'd get on soft and I felt like I was really struggling with the bottom. And so I think when I went to the tee was when I actually started to become a better chipper. But then on top of that, the versatility of this allowed me to be more, just pick the shots that I want with a 60 and hit them.
Yeah.
And so, especially with the tee, I felt like I was able to have a little bit of the bounce relief out of the bunkers to where if it was firm or soft, I still had enough underneath it to where I wasn't worrying about like if when I was playing an L, I might get stuck underneath one a little bit, or the K, I might bounce one. This allows me to do anything I want. And this is what I always tell people with the tee is that it's like, you know, you still have to have a good engine and good tires, but it's like this right here allows me to put everything together.
Yes.
And so, you know, the part that I've loved about this is that I can pick this thing out of the fairway anytime I want, but if I want to hit something super spinny, I can dig into it, but I don't have to worry about it digging too much. And so I've always loved, you know, being kind of a handle leaner, and then I've kind of learned more to kind of throw my hands underneath it just a little bit more, so I'm a little bit more shallow. But this guy in particular has been my favorite and has been a huge add to my bag.
So what would you say is the most important thing you look for in a 60? Is it versatility? Is it bunker performance? Is it trajectory? What would you say are
I
one or
think
two
it's,
things that you like?
yeah, I mean, I think number one being versatility, where it's like, you know, we're on perfect ryegrass right now or overseeded rye. Like I'm able to sweep underneath this no problem. If I'm on super grainy Bermuda, I can put my hands up a little bit higher, kind of work it a little bit more off the toe, and I don't have to worry about it digging. Like I'm able to, I know this wedge well enough now that I'm able to manipulate it on my own.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like you said, the three boxes I need to check, you know, full swing or, you know, really just distance control, chipping around the greens and bunker play, as long as I'm able to get what I want out of those three, I've got no complaints. And so the beauty of it, of this was, like you said, just one conversation over the phone, going from a K that was manipulated pretty heavily to go into a T where it's like straight off the rack, here you
Yeah.
go, pal. It was really cool for me to see. And then on top of that, getting better around the greens too helped a lot. But also just, you know, like some guys, they love feeling like they throw their right hand underneath it and they feel like they can draw their chips. Some guys feel like they like to cover it, like Jordan, where they hit more kind of cuts.
Yeah.
You're kind of able to do both. And so there have been times where, you know, when I've worked with my coach where it's like, okay, you know, hit a cut, hit a draw, and some guy might be next to me going, what are you talking about? You're hitting an 8-yard chip shot. Like, how are you cutting and drawing this? But that's just the versatility that I've got with this, where I feel like I'm able to cut one back into a ridge and stop it. Or if I need to, you know, at Augusta, where massive hills where, you know, Tiger used to talk about how he would work on his spin control around the greens to get balls to stop faster. I'm able to feel like I'm able to cut it or feel like I'm able to throw my hands underneath it almost like a bunker shot.
Yeah.
So this is, like I said, this guy's been a huge game changer in my game, especially.
Confidence builder.
Huge.
It's what you need at the highest levels of golf.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
let's hit some shots. Let's not waste any more time.
Yes.
Let me take these guys. Let's find a location. I'm going to let you choose. Pick a spot that you think you'd hit your 60 at.
Well, 90% or so, pretty much everywhere except right here.
I'll let you pick a good spot.
Why don't we go right here? This work for you?
This looks great. If you can, kind of talk us through this shot, right? What are we looking at, and what sort of shot are you going to try and execute here?
Yeah, so this one in particular, I've got, you know, a little bit downhill. This lie is fantastic. I'm going to try to hit one where I just kind of keep my hands a little bit higher. I love the feeling in my short game of being as much Steve Stricker as I can. That's something that's really helped me a lot, where not a lot of wrist hinge.
Yeah.
I used to be very handsy and would have to time it up at the bottom. And so now I spend a lot of my time, you know, actually, you know, sorry, course superintendents, but hitting shots off of greens when I'm practicing just to feel like I'm super shallow. You know, because right there, you're gonna find your low point very fast on doing something like that. But this one, I have my hands a little bit higher, kind of feel like I'm cutting across it here.
And you're looking for width?
Yeah. So as much width as I possibly can. So like this one right here, the beauty of this tee grind is that if I need to stop something quick, like these greens are a little bit softer than I expected. Like I felt like I needed to kind of cut that one a hair. I feel like on these, I can even lower my hands a little bit, aim over towards that ball and kind of flip it underneath.
It's really good.
So before I jump the gun, what changes have you made?
Well, let me start by saying the changes we make are never around the things that we already know you love.
Yes.
Right? When we talk to you and your peers about things you value in wedge play and wedge design, we know the grinds are in a great space, right? You validated that, your peers have validated that, so we're not changing the things that are interacting with the turf and the ball. So you're gonna get the same grinds and grooves that you've always loved. Things are always modified and manipulated slightly, right?
Right.
It's all based on the things that you shared with me. Trajectory is a really important part of what I want to see. Spin is an important part of what I want to see, and shaping and design is an important part of what I want to see. But the other thing that we focus on is CG, right? So while we're giving you the same grind to navigate through the turf, we're improving CG to help with lower ball flight and increases in spin.
Awesome.
We're also working on CG across the face, allowing you to create face rotation, either add it or slow it down, because we know there was a perfect balance there, right? On your stronger lofted wedges like your 50, we don't want it to overturn too much, right? The last thing you want to do is miss it long left. So we're going to slow that down slightly. But once we get to this, we know that face rotation is important. That's what's allowing you to control your Pro V1 and Pro V1X, is allowing that face and that ball to work together seamlessly.
Right.
So you're going to see that. You're going to see balance in our shapes. The toes are refined, where the top section of the toe is actually bumped out just a little bit, so the peakiest location is right in the center. Same thing with the leading edges and that perfect balance and symmetry. And then the design and how we change or manipulate blade length, right? So as we change soles, our blade lengths have to be very consistent. We found a perfect way to lock in profiles and hosel lengths and add the soles after that. So regardless if you use a 60 or a 58, you're gonna get the exact same part. The only thing that changes is the loft.
That's wild. You know what's funny? It was until you mentioned that, because there's such small changes that I think I would literally need to have my other 60. Like most of the time I'd be able to tell, but it's so small.
It's the little things that matter.
But it's the little things that matters, because even when, I think the last time when we were testing, even on the 9s, going from the 8s to the 9s, it took me probably like 2 weeks of like kind of looking at it where I'm like, man, what's the difference? And then all of a sudden I hit a few balls that are going, you know, trying to hit a sand wedge 100 yards, and I can see, oh, now I see it, where it felt like it's stuck on the face a little bit longer, but lowered it just a hair.
Yes.
And so yeah, I mean.
And that's the goal, right? Because we know you're gonna hit a bunch of great shots. But it's those times when maybe you're not so comfortable, or maybe the turf conditions change.
And that's the difference too, is that it's like, you know, okay, if I hit a 60 degree 105 yards, like congratulations, that's great, but how's it gonna react on the green?
Yes.
And so that's where, for me, where, okay, you know, kind of like, you know, the decision tree, if you will, is like, okay, can I get a 60 to land on the back edge of the green and stop? Or, you know, okay, if I can't, maybe we need to change shots to where I maybe need to run one up. Or maybe if I'm worried about it staying, you know, landing up by the hole and ripping back, okay, now I need something that's going to behave at the same window with just a little less spin. And so that's where, for me at least, the decision tree just kind of moves up the bag from there.
So let's choose one more spot, right? What's another style of shot that you'd be facing in, you know, on a Sunday of competitive play? You know, where's a location where you'd be like, oh, this is a spot that I really need to make sure that my wedge is performing at its highest?
Probably over there. What you think? Like that first 2 shots of the day, I'm like, don't blade it, don't blade it, don't blade it.
And while we're over here, but I know that you use the 60, 90% of the time, where would you hit your 54?
So my 54 would probably be from down here to where, if I hit the 60, it's gonna check. So then I would go to a 55 and try to run something up where I don't have to feel like I have to manipulate it as much.
Okay.
You wanna try that one?
So something really basic and simple.
Yeah, and even like, especially if we were on, if I was sitting like right here, let's say, and we were on, you know, very grainy Bermuda grass, like I can take that 55, make the exact same swing, still get the same amount of spin, but it doesn't dig as much.
Okay.
And so it's a lot about, like, you know, as much as, you know, being a tour pro, they say, oh, every shot you hit's perfect. It's like, well, I'm trying to make, instead of hitting this to 6 feet, I want to hit it to 4.5 or 5.
Yes. You
know, and then in reality, like, yeah, I might hole 1 out of 10 from here, or maybe more, whatever. But it's like, I want to make sure that my misses are not that penal.
Yes.
And so, like, if I've got something like this, I'm expecting to make it up and down, you know, 9 out of 10 times. But it's like, if I'm gonna, you know, if I've got kind of a shady lie, like you said, I want to be able to have something that I can trust that, okay, maybe the lie's not great, the contact's gonna be kind of hard to make it perfect. That's where I go to the 55, is just because it has a little bit more relief on the bottom for me, to where I'm able to just kind of hit a normal chip shot and it's gonna come out exactly like my 60, but it doesn't have the chance to dig as much.
Can you show us both of those shots? I'm gonna have you hit the 60 first, and then we'll move to the 55.
Not bad.
Pretty standard. And how would you change your shot here? What are you going to do to adjust
So
to the differences
yeah,
in
so
the?
in the 55, I'll open it up a hair just so I have a little bit more bounce. I'll get a little bit closer to it and I'll raise my hands a little bit. And so like one of my favorite things I've ever seen Stricker actually teach the guys is when I went to the President's Cup and he was helping JT with some of his chipping around the greens, just super grainy Bermuda. And so he's like, I want you to try to like stand as close as you can to it. And he's like, no, stand closer, stand closer. And JT's like, how am I supposed to hit this ball? And so actually Stricker explained how he's like, if you're back into the grain and you've got kind of have it sitting square, it's going to have a chance to dig. But if you get your hands a little bit higher, use it more off the toe, the feeling is off the toe, even though it's not. Now you have less of a chance to dig, and this thing has more of a chance of, I might bottom half an inch behind it, but it's going to come out solid every time just because it's not going to dig.
Interesting. That's pretty okay.
A little better.
You could probably make that.
Love my 60, man. Love that thing. We've tried so hard over the last few months to really get more 55s in my bag, or at least like chipping around the greens with them.
So like still that really good, right?
So like that one had no chance of me digging at all, which is especially on super tight ground, like that's imperative because it's like the last thing I want to do is blast one 7-8 feet by, and it's like, man, this is such an easy shot, but it's also like, let's take out that as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, your average from here is 3.5 feet. Well, I think I can manage that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's hit a few out of the bunker.
Let's do it.
This sand, and you're going to get a better feel of it here in a second when you dig in, but it kind of has a coarse feel to it. And it feels just, in my initial tapping on it, it feels like it has a moist base. So
yeah,
it could be somewhat firm underneath. Talk through the shot. Like, what are you thinking about here?
Yeah, so favorite kind of sand in general right here, just having a little bit of the, wet sand underneath it. When I dig in, especially, perfect. When I dig in, especially, is where I'm going to be able to get my feel. So I could tell it's really firm, really wet. So I always, whenever it's firmer and wetter, I actually get my stance more narrow so that I'm able to get more vertical, more up and down. Whereas like if I'm playing somewhere super soft, I'll probably get down a little bit lower, a little bit underneath. And so I feel like I'm able to swing it more. Because if I get super small, now I can feel more up and down. If I get more wide, I can feel like I can sweep underneath it a little bit. But this is so firm that I'll probably feel a little bit smaller stance for me. I always love having my weight like 60-40 on my left side. And then one of my favorite things just out of my boredom of being out for so long was watching a bunch of Stevie videos.
Oh yeah.
Where for him, it's almost like he's standing here where he's like kicking his legs out like this, almost like a catcher, and he just doesn't even move his body. I mean, his head doesn't move, nothing moves, and he just looks so simple. Whereas like, if I had something that was super short here, I'd want to do something crazy and get underneath it. But watching some of the stuff that he had done, especially, it's just so simple. I mean, keeping your base, like I said, he's got his feet kicked out, so now he's got a super sturdy base. He kind of has his knees kicked out, and then from here, like I said, I always have the ball pretty far forward, but I always change my width depending on how firm it is. And so like this one right here, kind of like maybe middle, just a hair firmer, and then I tried to basically just stay kind of in that phone booth where I don't try to move my body at all.
All right, now let's say for the sake of fun here, we've got a little further pin position. We got to go a little farther. I'm going to give you the sand wedge. What sort of scenario would you say the sand wedge fits when you're in a bunker like this?
Yeah, so two scenarios in general where I'd be kind of contemplating going to the sand wedge is if I need to land something really far or if I need to get something running across a green. So really there's kind of two shots for me where it's like, if I've got to hit something to where, let's say if I'm going past this pin where I want to land it at the pin and I'm going to just try to run one, I get a little bit wider, keep the face open. I've always had a habit of shutting it down, which then just leads to digging. And even if I hit a good shot, I still might kind of chunk it a little bit.
Yes.
So staying a hair more open and then actually feeling, this is kind of stealing one from Nick Faldo. He always felt that when he had long bunker shots, he almost felt like he was trying to like move the earth with the ball, where it was like,
oh, interesting,
where he would try to hit basically almost back here, but he would still be super wide, but it gave him no chance to spin it. Where if I'm going to try to spin something, I'll end up moving a little bit more forward, and then I'll try to get as close to the ball as I can.
So we're going for distance and a reduction in spin, more of a
Exactly.
release.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So I'll do the less spin one first, since that's the easier one.
That's perfect.
So like that one has absolutely no chance of spinning. I can get that one out there to, 50, 60 feet to run out for me.
And that can be a common shot for you on tour, right? When you're
Very much, especially par fives.
Yes.
Yeah, where, a lot of the par fives were coming in with, hybrid irons or woods or whatnot. It's a lot about where you miss it. Like you think of 18 at Torrey Pines, the Sunday pin on the left, well, that left bunker is terrible, but that right bunker is so easy, but it's so far away. Whereas
Yes.
I'm trying to basically make sure I'm missing them in the right spots. Because the last thing I want to do is have, a long iron in my hand, and then next thing you know, I've got a 20 footer for birdie, and I'm like, man, wasn't the bunker shot, it was actually the shot before that.
Yeah.
So like this one, where if I need to try to say like carry something, you know, 80 feet roughly, I would then go to one where I've got to feel like I've got to pinch it a little bit harder, get a little bit closer to the ball, where I enter it about an inch from the ball. So that one has a little bit more height on it, has a chance to stop quicker, and I just can't hit it that far with a 60. So
Yeah. So it's good. It's a great tool to have when you're in that scenario, right?
well, and this goes exactly back to our point with the sand wedge, where it's like I'm able to use this around the greens, where if I want to knock off some spin, I'm able to use it, where I've got a little bit more versatility, a little bit more help with how the club is designed. I'm able to hit the bunker shots that I want, and then it still has that feel of an iron to me, which obviously I love. So checks all the boxes.
Beautiful. So first impressions of SM10, what do you think?
I mean, they look unbelievable, dude. I mean, especially, the 60 is, like we said, we've spent a lot of time with that. I love that thing. This guy still has all the versatility. I'm able to hit all the shots that I want with it. This is sick, man.
Good.
Crushed it as always.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.